Hello, everybody. Hi.
Hi, everyone.
A little bit of technical difficulties today, but we made it through. We're all here, and we have the pleasure of being here with Andrew. How you doing, Andrew?
Doing great. Doing great. How are you guys doing?
Good.
So the question you always ask Andrew is, where are you calling in from? Since you're always...
Actually, I have to ask you guys, where am I? Where the hell am I? I'm in Juno Beach, Florida this week for a little golf for NBC. So I'm at the lovely, where am I? Embassy Suites.
Home is where the heart is, Andrew.
Yeah.
So does that that mean space maybe for Andrew?
Mm-hmm. Yes, indeedy.
Well, why don't we get this party started, Caroline?
Yeah, so welcome everyone to a very unique and exciting community-led workshop today. We are honored to have Andrew Parris as our guest speaker and virtual tour host today. My name is Caroline, Director of Astronaut Experiences at Space Plus, and I am co-hosting this evening's Twitter space with Emily Higgins. Emily, get us started.
Let's do this.
Let's do this.
Yeah, amazing. Hi, everyone. I'm Emily Higgins. I am the director of Space Plus. And if you are new to our community, we are the first Web3 space program by Uplift Aerospace, increasing access and diversity in space by harnessing the power of Web3, AR, VR, NFTs, and blockchain technology to provide greater access to space and space experiences. And so to achieve this, we have a broad range of social, digital, and physical infrastructure projects to support commercial activities, but also culture in space. And it is really our pleasure tonight to have the chair of the Starborn Council in our community here to give us an exclusive virtual tour of Space Center Houston. We have Titan, or you may know him as Andrew Parris. He was a NASA TV contractor for 13 years. He volunteers at Space Center Houston. He is the co-founder and co-leader of Inspired 24. And of course, recently he was selected as our Starborn Council chairperson and future astronaut. So he has been a broadcast television engineer for 42 years and has won 3 technical Emmy Awards. What an intro. We don't often get to do a crazy intro like that. Hi, Andrew.
Hi, I need to make that shorter. That took a little too long.
Whew, I'm winded. I'm going to have to memorize it, I think.
Yeah. Well, I forget sometimes too.
I'll be happy to throw a couple things on the end of my introduction.
Yes. Yeah, I think so. We're all due for a rebrand, I think.
Yeah.
So Andrew, tell us about why you wanted to, because you came to me a few weeks ago and said, hey, I want to take the community tour of Space Center Houston. So why don't you walk us through the background?
Okay, well, yeah. So I became a volunteer at Space Center Houston about a year ago now, and it really changed my life. It's what I consider to be the thing that hard into space, and getting to talk and share with people the visit day to talk space. It's just an awesome thing. So I thought, people can't make it. I mean, there's lots of people who do make. We get millions of visitors every year. But there are people, if you look online at any kind of videos, a lot of you see they're too short, or they're just like tourist videos, sound, some narration. So I said, well, I can do something like that. So I said, hey, you guys want to do that? So I grabbed my phone and ran out and shot some video and put it together. I was editing on the plane a little bit on the flight over.
Well, yeah, you did a phenomenal job. You did an absolutely amazing job, given the timing as well. And we're just delighted to share. Do we want to jump into the introduction to this amazing virtual tour? All right, let me bring this up. I'm just gonna make, oh that big. There we go.
There we go.
Maybe we'll do gas. Yes, we're cooking with gas, as my grandmother would say. Perfect.
Greetings, and welcome to Space Center Houston, the home of the Johnson Space Center Visitor Center. Today I'm going to be showing you three of the most impressive pieces of hardware here at Space Center Houston. First, we'll see the Falcon 9 booster from SpaceX. Second, we'll see the shuttle carrier aircraft and shuttle mock-up Independence. And third, we're going to see the Saturn V rocket that took us to the moon. Let's go. This SpaceX Falcon 9 first stage, Block 3 variant, is known as Booster B-1035. It flew twice in 2017 for NASA. Both missions, CRS-11 and CRS-13, delivered cargo to the International Space Station. It was the first booster to be reused twice for a NASA mission. Both flights had B-1035 land at LZ-1, or Landing Zone 1, at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station, right next door to the Kennedy Space Center. After B-1035's second flight, it was retired and then donated to Space Center Houston for display. You can tell B-1035 flew more than once by the black soot that covers most of the booster. This is from the exhaust of the 9 Merlin 1D engines. The soot comes from the RP-1 kerosene fuel the Falcon 9 uses. And yes, the Falcon 9 gets its name from the 9 engines. One of the coolest things about the Falcon 9 display here is you can actually touch the rocket and not get in trouble. See?
Yeah, so I haven't been arrested yet.
Yeah, I giggled really hard when I saw that the first time.
Yeah. So the most when you go and look at most this sorts of stuff, you don't get to touch them. You're not allowed to touch them. So that's unusual. They let you touch it. So with this witty anecdote about, hey, this Falcon 9 is such reliable and they've launched them so often. And SpaceX, just before we went on the air, SpaceX was supposed to launch Galaxy 33 and 34 into and geostationary orbits, and they had an abort at 30 seconds, so I couldn't really. They're pretty remarkable. This would have been their 46th launch of the year and 189th overall. SpaceX. I mean, they really have revolutionized the commercial space game.
Yeah, absolutely. So why are you allowed to touch it, Andrew?
Basically because it still technically belongs to SpaceX, and they didn't, it's a lot of the hardware that you see at different NASA centers, and that's the default. When NASA's done with a piece of equipment, it's ownership, or it's for the Air and Space Museum, for the Smithsonian, and so they have control over it, and they just generally don't want, because it's old and they don't want anybody messing with it. But in the case of the Falcon 9 booster, you can touch it. You can't climb on it, but you can touch it.
Oh, that's the next question, because I know my kids, they love anything they can touch. And then they would probably be halfway up the rocket as soon as you say, yeah, you can touch it.
Well, it's pretty high up there. The grid fins are really the only thing you can touch with any reliability. And then the video, it's a very dirty rocket. It only flew twice. Right now, the Falcon flights is 14, I believe. They have one or two 14. And this is going to launch another, be the 14th launch. And that's incredible because the original design, 10, they would do 10, excuse me. Oops. I lost. Sorry, technical problems. You had to use my backup iPhone area. The original design, at least the public known design, was a 10 flight, and they would tear it and do refurbishment. Well, they got to 10 flights and they said, hey, that's doing really good. So now they'll take it out. So sky's the limit right now, but SpaceX has their stuff figured out.
That's incredible. So can I ask my one question real quick? So Andrew, where did you learn those drone moves?
No, that drone, all that drone footage you see was courtesy of a nice public domain B-roll part of their website. You and use it for whatever, for promotions and so forth. They're very.
Yeah, we immediately thought you were a wizard. We were like, Andrew needs to do all of our drone stuff forever now. Like, this is insane.
Everything else I can do. Actually, I know a couple drone guys, and it's not easy. I mean, it's actually the licensing.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about what kind of cargo would be delivered to the ISS from the Falcon 9? Would it be like food?
Yeah, just about everything. Food, clothing, experiments, just about, everything that they need on the space station. Batteries, spacesuit parts, spare parts, everything. It's just like it's like DoorDash now, or Uber Eats. But they've been doing it. The nice thing about the SpaceX Dragon fly missions is the capsule doesn't burn up on the way home, like say the Soyuz or ships. The Dragon comes home, so when they're done with all the cargo, bringing it up, they can, or in some cases, sometimes they send spacesuit parts home to be repaired, or the things, experiments, and then they're brought in, and it saves money, so forth. Of course, basically it's the same capsule now, the cargo and the crew travels now. It just became a common design.
Okay, but no family and friends in the cargo coming up.
Not till somebody makes a really cheap movie about it, I guess. I don't know. There was a movie when I was a kid. It was aired on CBS called "Stowaway to the Moon." It was about a little kid and I thought that was the thing that's coolest in the world. I couldn't wait to stow away. And then, of course, I grew up and realized, he never. It was a fun movie.
There's an application process.
Yeah. I think we all know the science behind what happens if you stow away to the moon, guys.
Yeah.
If you don't, see our moon hoax theory.
Yeah.
Go over intimately how dangerous it actually is to go to the moon.
Oh yeah.
Wild. Okay, so you mentioned that the B-1035 flew twice in 2017 before being retired.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious how often boosters are reused now, and what allows them to fly so many times now. Like, what's the technological advancement there?
The shortest, I believe the shortest turnaround, I have to go check it, is less than 30 days, and maybe 20. I can't remember the exact number, but there's quite a few of them. Like I said, there's at least one over its lifetime, so far, and they still, there's no doing it for longer. And the reason they can do that is because SpaceX just over-engineered them. They took the same methodology that they do for airliners. Airlines for airliners are built with such precision and durability that they can last and not have, and reliability stays up there. So they use that same methodology and thinking when they the Falcon 9, the Merlin 1D engines specifically. But the whole thing, the engine, the entire 9 rocket, top to bottom, was from conception to construction was all usable, which is a difference. If you're like when they built the Saturn V, it was built for one-time use only and throwaway. There was no, but to build something reusable, you have to take the time to test and make sure it's reusable more money and time. So. Sure.
It's like a philosophical shift, I guess, in the technology. You're assuming it's going to stay around because you're going back multiple times, and you need to have it be reusable. Cool. Awesome. I like that. Sorry, Caroline.
No, I was going to say, no, that's really exciting. That exactly what you mean. Like, it's that shift in philosophy that has really transformed the space, like the space race to what it is today. And we're living the future, guys. So, Andrew, you shared a fun fact behind how the Falcon 9 got its name from its 9 engines. What other name origins stick out in your mind? I always think that's like fascinating how these structures or, like these space objects get their names.
Yeah. Well, it's like during the Saturn project, they had the Saturn 1, Saturn 1B, and then when they built the Saturn 5 from the 5 engines. And this is basically just the engineers come up with these simple names and they stick. The other way of doing that is there's all the new commercial rockets. There's a company called Firefly, that name because they like the TV show. So that's what they used. It's kind of whatever you want to do.
Oh, I love that. I didn't know. That is a fun fact that I learned. Thank you for that, Andrew.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
It's space. You can do whatever you want. The names,
Yeah,
exactly. The sky's the limit with the
guys.
We should have a community contest on what we name next.
Naming contest too for all the different manufacturer stuff. Of course, they have to be careful about some of this.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Well, I have one more question before we move on to the second part, Andrew.
Okay.
So the Falcon 9 really changed the entire launch industry and decreased launch costs, increased launch frequency. Let's chat a little bit, if you want, about the Starship now. And do you think Starship will be successful as the largest heavy lift rocket ever built, and have the same sort of industry impact as the Falcon 9 did? That's kind of
absolutely
a profound question, but
I mean, and super heavy will be an order of magnitude of more of a bigger or cost per kilo to low Earth orbit and to planets. So when you, like the old adage that I like to use is, imagine if you, actually Elon said this, but imagine if every time you got on an airliner, they threw the plane away after you got there, millions of dollars. Well, now if we have a rocket that you don't throw away, price per pound just goes. It's going to allow us to access any point in the solar system we want. And it's U.S. military is looking very serious at it. NASA's already signed on. They've already contracted SpaceX to deliver the first lunar lander that they'll use, Artemis 3, when they go land. First woman and first person of color walk on the South Pole is going to be a Starship. So everybody's counting on it. It's just a matter of it's going to take for a while there was an SLS or Starship Super Heavy will fly first, and then Starship's done. Well, no, it's still kind of neck and neck. So we'll see which one it goes. I'm rooting.
You're what? Sorry, you cut out a little bit there. You're rooting
for both.
Yes. Team player, Andrew. I love that.
Yeah.
Caroline, any other questions before we move on to the second part? Andrew, any comments or anything to preface this next video as we continue our tour?
Yeah. The only thing is we're going into the space shuttle craft.
All right. Here we go, guys.
The Space Shuttle Independence and 747 shuttle carrier aircraft are located in Independence Plaza here at Space Center Houston. The 747 shuttle carrier aircraft, or SCA, is NASA tail number 905. It is one of 2 747 SCAs NASA used throughout the Space Shuttle program to transport Space Shuttle orbiters around the country. You can see by the nose markings on 905 all of the heavy lifting it did for the Space Shuttle program, including the drop test in 1977. 905 is now a museum to the Space Shuttle program that you can walk through and learn about. The Space Shuttle Independence is a full-scale, high-fidelity replica of the Space Shuttle orbiter. It started life as the Explorer at the Kennedy Space Center Visitor Complex. It was transferred to Space Center Houston in 2012. You can walk into the flight deck, mid-deck, and the payload bay and see for yourself what the interior of a space shuttle was like to live and work in. It was pretty tight fit for up to 7 astronauts at a time. Independence Plaza is a must-see when visiting Space Center Houston.
Love your drone shots, Andrew.
Thank you, Space
Just,
Center Houston.
just as some background for everyone else here, I threw in a lot of drone questions.
Yeah, I wish I'd caught that earlier.
No, it's fine.
I have a little anecdote, personal story about the shuttle carrier aircraft, that 747 Dryden from 87 to 90. Yeah, 87 to 90. Doing shuttle, they would have an open house where the public could come in to the NASA Center, Dryden Center. What they would do is they would park the 747s there, and they're essentially, they flew empty. There was no seating, or it's all open. But it was completely open back then. And all the little kids would love to run back and forth, and would spend all day just running back and forth inside there. And that was their favorite thing to do every year. Now they're grown up with their own kids. I need to bring them there so they can run them back and forth too.
I mean, that's what I would be doing.
Yeah. Inside of a 747, what else are you going to do?
Yeah, exactly. So that looks pretty cozy. How long would 7 astronauts be in together? Because that, I mean, you're snuggling close.
And I like to tell people, well, I've been told by a lot of astronauts, so I tell people that they say space is like camping. It's really uncomfortable and it smells bad, but the view is awesome. Folks would be up there. The missions would be anywhere from a week, 10 days, 2 weeks. Columbia had an advantage. It had what they call an extended duration pallet, which was an extra pallet of oxygen, hydrogen, and consumables. They would plug load bay, and they could stay up. In theory, they could stay up for an entire month. They never stayed that long. I think the longest they went was 15 days, 16 days. But they always leave a lot of margin just in case, in case of bad weather, as we've seen some of the Dragon returns from the International Space Station stayed 3 to 4 days, and at least with the Dragon capsule, even it's got a place they can wait, and plenty of consumables. Where a shuttle, it only had so much, so they're managing those. So yeah, 10 days, 2 weeks was pretty much the normal mission.
That is a long time, a small space.
You're doing 6 months on the International Space Station.
I was going to ask.
That's some law hall work.
How does it compare to the International Space Station and any of the space? What the Inspiration 4 went up in? I know there was only 4 of them, but do you have like a comparison?
Yeah, the Inspiration 4, for one example, was a Dragon capsule, which is designed to hold surplus cargo. And they were only up for 3 days, which is a relatively short period of time. As regular bathroom facilities, I've not yet seen the actual. Apparently, you have to become very, very friendly with your cohorts. Space shuttle and the International Space Station have an actual private bathroom you can go to and save face and so forth. So that's one of the things you're dealing with. Now, I know Polaris Dawn mission is going to be 5 days, and that's going to be really doing spacewalks. And so their suits are not going to be the IVA suits, which are relatively easy suits, which are much more bulkier. So I'm not sure what the protocols have been there, but I have noticed one. It depends on which crew, the international, that some of the crews choose, because they're only in the hours from the time they launch till they dock, about 26 hours. I noticed one crew, I believe it was, chose to wear their long black underwear. They get out of their suits and they just stayed in their long, wearing the diapers. That's, at this point, that's what I saw. And if you survive with the diapers, if you cut down your fluids and so forth like that. But those are, I hope to one day.
Yeah, I would not consume anything for that day. I'd just be like, nothing in, nothing out. Like this is a 24-hour emergency.
Yeah. Yeah.
My body is
That's
simple.
Yeah. A space flight. If you're just doing a 15-minute suborbital flight, no big deal. But anything over a couple days,
You get really personal with your crewmates.
Yeah.
can ask
Yeah,
Dr. Proctor when you see her next.
Oh yeah, she's got some good stories for sure. We'll let her.
Oh, I'm sure she does.
We'll let her tell her stories. But yeah. Okay. Well, I guess moving on from life in the shuttle. How long was the shuttle carrier aircraft in use for? And
believe it's I believe they started. They developed the aircraft in like 1976 or 77. So they were around before because they were used actually for the drop test they used, which was a non-spaceworthy version of the space shuttle they used for aerodynamic testing, and then several where they released it and then let it glide down. They had to prove the orbiter was a very good idea that it would work, but you always want to test and test and test. So some use longer than the shuttle program itself.
Gotcha. And where did it fly and land out of when it was carrying shuttles? Sorry if I missed that.
That's a great question. The majority of the work it did was flying back and forth between Edwards Air Force Base. They did land, STS-3 did land at White Sands in New Mexico. So it did a flight in and out of there. Generally, they wouldn't fly a C-141 Air Force Pathfinder that would fly ahead of it because they couldn't fly through orbiter's tiles while they could survive the high temperatures of reentry, where they'd have this C-141 flying Pathfinder for it, and they would hopscotch. They would go from Edwards to El Paso, and then El Paso to Houston, Kennedy Space Center. And if there was some weather systems, they might divert to say Dallas or New Orleans or wherever. It was basically between the East Coast and the West Coast. There were later times where they also did the delivery for them, so they had to deliver an orbiter to. And they did a lot of flying around, and they did some publicity tours. And the Enterprise was delivered to New York. I'm sorry, Enterprise was delivered to New York, and then Discovery back to. Oh no, it was Atlantis. I can't keep those straight. It's at Smithsonian in DC, and then Atlantis is at Kennedy Space Center.
Your memory is encyclopedic. I just want to flag that.
Yeah. Yeah. I gotta remember those.
I would be making
stuff up. Claim nothing.
Caroline.
I would just be throwing some constellation names like Greek names and dates, and then major cities, and people would be like, "Oh, okay."
Yeah. Epsilon. Sagittarius. Yeah, okay, whatever.
No, you're fantastic, Andrew. And again, like I always learn fun facts with you around, and then I proceed to pass those fun facts along. So
that's good. Thank you. That's always encourage share it with people.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's so great. And my husband is like such a space nerd, so I'm like, did you know this? This is what I learned.
You can get out a lot of doing to test them on those things and get it right.
Yeah, definitely. I'm gonna give you a 5-star review, Andrew.
Thank you.
So I love that like you're able to walk through this, through the shuttle, and you're able to see where everything is, including the payload space.
Yeah.
And like nowadays, a lot more organizations have access to that. What's the range of experiments and objects you've seen go up, and like how have the trends changed through the space program from what it was when it first started to like commercial entities stepping in?
It's amazing to see the range of payloads that have flown from the shuttle days, the early days. There's a push in the 80s for commercial space. NASA was launching satellites from the like communication satellites from the shuttle, and that was their big customer. And science was smaller scale, but after the Challenger accident, they decided NASA needs to spend time doing science in companies. And so, yeah, then they developed the Space Lab, which was a module they would put in the back, and that allowed them to not only do more experiments in any given mission. There was also Space Hab, which is a smaller version of that. So there was always new sciences and material sciences. I remember there was a couple missions where they were doing how fire acts in 0G, which is to see that work being done, because that's something they need to develop. A space station was built to know how to deal with fire and so forth. There were robotics from Germany where they had a robotic arm with two cameras, and they would control it from Germany while it was up in the sky, or excuse me, so telerobotics was developed. So it's just you name it, they do it.
Okay, have to ask, how does fire act in 0G?
It round because there's no gravity to force the flame to structure up.
Can you throw fireballs?
So it's I don't know. They haven't told us about that, but fire acts much differently in space, and that's why they had to figure that stuff out. So the bottom line for fire, of course, is just to remove the oxygen. Now the Russians' Mir space station had a 5 years ago. I believe it was there was an American board, Dr. Jerry Linenger was there, and things that woke everybody up to when they were getting ready to design. Yeah, we really got to understand how fire works, because the Russians tried their best by, you can't just shoot a fire like an old dry chemical fire extinguisher out, because then you're going to start, and you can't use that like a halon, because halon removes the oxygen and makes everybody mass and so forth. So it was a whole new science that had to be developed and studied.
Man, that's phenomenal. I've never thought of that even a little bit. Wow. Yes, that's a hugely important area of research.
No, absolutely, yeah.
I think I've got this image of playing with fireballs. I don't know if that's just the airbender avatar nerd in me, but it sounds like fun. I would be part of that experiment. All right. So I think we're ready to go on to our last segment, Andrew. Any closing thoughts or introductions to our last video, our last produced video?
This is the place that is closest to me, since I grew up was where I'm from, and that's when it's very close to my heart. So being able to go and show everybody is very important to me.
Amazing. Well, we're so grateful that you're sharing this with us tonight.
Yes.
All right.
Happy to do so.
Here we go.
Welcome to Rocket Park. Outside here, there are two replica rockets. The white and silver rocket is the little Joe 2. It was used to test the launch escape system for the Apollo Saturn missions. In case of an emergency, during the early minutes of the launch, it could be activated either manually by the commander or automatically by the flight computer. It would tractor the command module, or CM, away from the Saturn V, thus saving the astronauts. The thinner black and white rocket is the Mercury Redstone. This is the rocket that sent Alan Shepard and Gus Grissom on suborbital flights in 1961. These were America's first steps into space. Now let's go inside and see the Saturn V, the rocket that took us to the moon. This is the Saturn V rocket. It's 363 feet tall, weighed 6.5 million pounds fully fueled at liftoff, and the 5 Rocketdyne F1 engines generated 7.5 million pounds of thrust. It was used for Apollos 8 through 17 and Skylab. It was designed by Dr. Werner Braun. Unlike some rockets today, the Saturn V was not reusable. In fact, the only part that returns to Earth is the command module, or CM, at the top of the Saturn V. This is not a mock-up or a model. This is actual flight-ready hardware built in the late 60s to fly in the early 70s. But due to budget cutbacks at NASA, Apollos 18, 19, and 20 were canceled. So what you see here are parts and pieces to Apollos 18, 19, and 20. This Saturn V was brought to JSE back in 1977, where it was put on display outside. Over the years, the Texas weather did a lot of damage to it, and so in 2004, a restoration program was begun. The building was built around it to protect it, and the National Air and Space Museum headed up the process of cleaning, repairing, and painting the Saturn V. So what you see is what the Saturn V looked like in 1971. Right now, the Saturn V holds the record for the largest and the most powerful rocket to ever successfully fly. Over at the Kennedy Space Center, NASA is preparing to launch the SLS, or Space Launch System, for the Artemis 1 mission. That's the rocket that will take it back to the moon. Once it flies successfully, it would become the record holder of the most powerful rocket with 8.4 million pounds of thrust.
Is anyone else like tears? I don't know if it's just the time of night, but that hit me really hard.
The music I picked, I used the heroic music and so forth. I have to apologize. I had a little audio. I have to fire my entire remote crew because the audio had a break up there, but we'll for next time. But I wanted to make 2 points about that. I mentioned there that the rocket's not reusable, and it people away when I tell them that none of this was reusable. They're like, oh yeah, you went and fished it out of the water because SpaceX has made it so commonplace now that it's also it was we were in a literal race with the Soviet Union at the time. Creating something reusable takes time and money, and they didn't have a lot of time, but they did have a lot of money. And also the fact that the first and second stages would crash in the Atlantic Ocean, and they wouldn't. Because the way they flew them, they vented out all their propellant before the chemical contamination. But just a lot of that, it's all aircraft aluminum. The engines have some unique metals, but most of it was. But the other one I wanted to point out was, I don't know if you guys noticed the fins on those rockets, and if you look back at rockets in the early late 50s, early 60s, and in the 70s, they all had fins because they were all designed by Dr. Wernher von Braun, who designed the V2 rocket too, and he believed in fins. And in the early days of rockets, because rockets nowadays, they had to have fins because that wasn't available to them. Anyway, by the time they got to the Saturn V, they had developed in fact, those 5 engines, the outside 4 could gimbal to steer the rocket and the fin. And in fact, at one point during some of the early designs didn't have the fins on them, and Dr. von Braun asked his underlings, well, the rocket engines can gimbal now, and the speeds that they're going at, it'd be kind of useless. And he says, I designed the rocket. My rockets have fins. So the Saturn V had one, said it would have fins. I believe it was the last rocket to have been some smaller ones, but the last great rocket that had fins.
No way. Very cool. Very cool. So it's mind-blowing that this massive, seemingly very expensive piece of hardware was just retired. We do have a question from the Discord that is related. Let me just do a shout out here to Nguyen. Would you mind speaking a little bit more about why the shuttle program was retired? I know this is kind of an aside, but
that's fine.
If we can circle back to why the
retired.
Yes.
Well, very good question. There's a lot of misconceptions about why the shuttle was retired. Essentially, the fixed amount of money they get too much money, and you have to figure out how to make to do what they wanted to do. Columbia accident, they basically said, we just want to fly the shuttle. To shuttle also, people don't know this, but it was $1 billion a flight. That's a lot of money for one. The original promise for the shuttle missions back when in the 70s when they were proposing it was 100 flights was going down because of the reusability. That everybody was talking about reusability, and it never panned out. The reliability to refurbish the tiles and go through the engines just took too much time and money. Came up with building the International Space Station. As they were building it, spend their pennies wisely. And so when they got to the point where, well, we don't need the shuttle anymore because space station, we really don't have a use for it. And that's when the push for commercial space to access lower amounts of cargo push. So they basically said, okay, that's as much money we have. Now we don't have to fly a commercial space and to support the space station. And then also they started the push for the return to the moon. And that's where our constellation, which basically got canceled because of budgets and then got reborn as Artemis. Basically, the shuttle was retired because of money. It served its life. And that's true of all kinds of, people ask me about the Saturn V that's lying there at Johnson. We fly this today. Well, technically, if it was in good enough shape, you might be able to, but there's no caught up and past it. We have rocket engines that are much more powerful, much more efficient systems, makes certain things not needed anymore. I know that sounds mean. I understand what that means, but it's just because it was time for the next. I really like the fact that NASA is taking a step away from the mundane people to space station and spending their money on the exploration, which is where they need to be on the cutting edge, where we can learn how to go to Mars. That's the big thing with Artemis.
Yeah, thanks for that. And similarly, the Apollo retiring missions 18, 19, and 20 for Apollo, was that also just mostly due to budget cuts? It seems
actually, if you take the way I have interpreted it, a good job of beating the Soviet Union to the moon. There was never really a serious competition. It started about 5 years late on their rocket design, their N1 rocket, and that was basically because of their bureau system. They competed against each other as opposed to an open bidding system to get the best. System gave them a disadvantage, and so by the time they started working on it, they didn't have enough to beat them. And by the time, even by Apollo 13 in 1960, obvious that the Russians were not going to get, or the Soviets weren't going to get there. There's even it started. They were asked so when are you going to go to the moon? They said, oh, we're never going to the moon. We're going to lower our space stations up. So basically, Congress said, "Hey, Bob, and we want this money back." And when any government system, there's always a buck of money to fly it, and so they took the bucket of money and fly it, which is about in 1969 $1 million. So times 3, that's almost $500 million in 1969, and plus more going on, and many other social programs they needed the money for. So it's that hardware not fly. If I had a time machine, I'd go back and make whatever reason if I would, if I could do it. But on the flip of that coin is we help and to help inspire people too, because in the aerospace world, you very rarely have unflown hardware. They are so expensive.
Yeah, and what a phenomenal example of a massive piece of unflown hardware.
The largest at this point.
Are there other pieces, or is this really like the main example?
Well, okay, the Space Center Houston, Johnson Space Center has the only fully Saturn V rocket. Those are parts and pieces, like I said, from Apollos 18, 19, and 20. The Kennedy Space Center of flight certified, and the Marshall Space Flight Center has one piece. They have our mock-ups or other things. But something I've learned over the years talking to people that sometimes some cases, and maybe not in this one, but in some cases, the only difference between a flight certified piece of is literally a signature on a piece of paper. And so you can have a piece of hardware that hasn't gone through its acceptance, and it's just as worthy of flying, just hadn't been certified at the documentation levels. So kind of a contest to see who's got the better stuff, and it actually took, which was much, because when Congress pulled the money, essentially NASA called all and they all put their tools down and walked away, and a lot of documentation was misplaced. So to find the serial numbers and figure out what was what.
Well, we have a couple of NASA scientists, rocket scientists on our roster. Maybe we could just get a couple of signatures that way and move it along.
That's true. They probably have their sign off on them like that.
We'll have to run that by Joan for feasibility, I think.
Yeah.
Oh, you're muted, Caroline. I was gonna say, like, Joan's like, I do not know these people. I've never seen them in my life.
Hey, what does she know? The one satellite she worked in crashed into our moon. So Right. Just kidding, Boom. Just kidding. You did a great job on it. Proud of it.
She's worked with a bunch, right?
Oh yeah. That's the one I know about. She thing about her job, she gets to work on so many different things. I think I even saw some flying back seat on a fighter aircraft too, which is another fulfilled. So.
Okay. Well, let me just move on. I know we're a little bit, I'm just checking the time here. I know we're getting close to the end here. But just kind of circling back to payload capacities, Andrew, just for reference on compatibility, what's the payload capacity to low Earth orbit compared to Falcon 9? Sorry, you just cut out a little bit there.
You wanted payload capacity of the Saturn V rocket with the Falcon 9?
Yeah.
Oh boy, I don't know the specific numbers, but you got to remember the Saturn V was designed to be what they call a heavy lift rocket to put I forget the exact ton. It was hundreds of tons to space, or it could send stuff to the moon also. Because you got to remember the Saturn V was also used to fly Skylab stage of a Saturn V. So they were all kinds of plans for follow-on with the Saturn V. In fact, there was a step up after the Nova class, which was going to be essentially a Saturn V, and then they put a new for even larger engines. I think they were the proposed F2 engines. So you're talking about just to low Earth orbit, and almost direct. That rocket, I believe, could do a direct ascent to the moon.
Oh. So what did we miss out on Apollos 18, 19, and 20? Like, what's history missing?
Well, that's a good question. They had proposals on where to land them. It would have been more geologically locations, but I believe one of the proposals was landing on the back side of the moon, on the side of the moon we hadn't. It's the mysterious side, and only recently, in the last couple of years, China landed on the backside of the moon and studied it. And the topography between the side of the moon and the moon are completely different. Because the moon is tidally locked, so we always see the same base. So it's much more cratered, much more scarred, which proves that the moon has been acting as our protector. Essentially, it's flying around and it's catching some of the asteroids that would otherwise hit us. So it means that there's the lunar regolith turned up, so we can see deeper into the moon's history, which is essentially what's the history of the moon. We can find it. It also means that any valuable resources that could be readily available on that side, because it's not crusted over and healed.
Oh, interesting.
And that's where the dinosaurs are hiding, right, Andrew?
Well, they're not hiding because remember they keep coming out at the moon port.
They're thriving, Caroline.
Thriving at the moon
Thriving
port.
on the moon port, yeah. I can't go in there one day and not be attacked
by dinosaurs.
That's the next phase of the metaverse, is actually like running from the dinosaurs.
Well, you can ride a rocket, so you should be able to ride a dinosaur.
Yeah, we'll have to get them to saddle some up for us next time.
Yeah.
We can race rockets versus dinosaurs.
Yeah, as soon as they put a control stick on that rocket, it'd be a lot more fun, because right now you get shot out to who knows where. So
yeah. Okay, so Andrew, you've seen a lot of flights through your years at NASA, and as a space enthusiast in general, what is your best guess of when Artemis is going to fly? Because it's, there's been a lot of things happening.
I can give you exactly when it's going to fly. Artemis 1 will launch when it's, and that's true of any rocket. When it's ready to fly, it'll fly. Until it's ready, you all experience in a short couple of weeks my career for 13 years, which is don't get your hopes up because something's going to go wrong. And that's just now one thing that commercial space is doing is helping with the and maturity of systems. And so that's why commercial space is a good way to do it. To better, faster, cheaper, which is an old NASA idiom, but they're just because they can worry about one thing instead of having to worry about everything. NASA has to worry about a lot, and so one thing's about going commercial, you can break it down and worry about just low. But yeah, Artemis will fly. It will fly eventually, but when it's ready, to watch it, because it's going to be one heck of a show.
Yeah, I'd love to hurry on down and see Joan when it goes, but you just never know. But a trip to Florida is not, that's great. Even if it doesn't fly and you get a trip to Florida, that's still pretty awesome. So we do have another question from the Discord, and I think it's a really wonderful community question, because there's a lot of young people in our community and on our Discord that love space and are still either studying or looking to change paths to get more involved in aerospace. And who do we have? And Caroline, do you know who asked this question? I just got sent the question.
It is from Nguyen, who only likes 3 things: cooking, hecka-tall trees, why are they like that, and gaming.
I love that you added their Discord bio. That's amazing. They're looking for advice from you for somebody who's interested in joining the aerospace industry, which I think you're a wonderful person to chat a little bit about that.
Well, yeah, that is a great question. I get asked that a lot when I'm at Space Center Houston. In fact, I had him who the son was I think he was 16. He's been in a lot of robotic competitions, and he really enjoys. If you want to be a NASA astronaut, if you want to go fly in space, basic rule is 2 science and an engineering, and learn to do everything. Learn to scuba dive, learn to skydive, learn to fly, and that's the ultimate goal for some people, is to be a NASA astronaut. Now, nowadays there was NASA astronaut, and there was, of course, there were physical limitations. Like when I was a kid, you couldn't wear glasses. I cried because I couldn't be an astronaut anymore. Well, that changed later with the shuttle program. Height and weight charts changed, but now with commercial space, you don't have to be. You can find a part of commercial space, whether it be engineering, sciences, what are like, and you can find yourself a niche within the NASA community, either a Fed or a contractor, or you can start looking at all the other aerospace companies. That's where find a company that piques your interest. They're doing something you're interested in doing, and talk to them about. Are literally tens of thousands of open jobs within the aerospace industry funded, and they need bodies, they need people, they need kids, young people out of college to bring people on to learn as they go and so forth. I mean, look at the proliferation of companies now. Firefly just got their first launch, so now we have a new one on. Time a new launcher goes up, it's good for everybody. And keep in mind too, with all that, when the International Space now is going to be deorbited in 2030, but before that happens, we're going to have 4 to 5 commercial. I can't keep track of all of them, but all those space stations are going to design, figure out how to fly them, so forth, and then they're going to need people to operate them. You don't have to be an astronaut per se to have to be the pilot and the so forth. You can be a scientist, and you just happen to go to work in space. In fact, NASA has decided to bring back the shuttle program. They had something called a payload specialist. It was a commander, a mission specialist, which are generally career at a position called a payload specialist, which is essentially a scientist who had an experiment, a company wanted to fly a payload. They would be just that specialist for that payload, and they would train to fly. They're bringing that back for the International Space Station. So if you have a large organization like a Johns Hopkins or whatever has a payload they want to fly on the space station, rather than having to train the NASA astronauts very busy, they can have one person trained to do that and do it intensely for 3. They can just work on that one thing.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I mean, we hear Mike Mongo, well, Caroline and I specifically, who spend tons of time with Mike Mongo, we hear him say almost daily, the jobs of tomorrow are in space.
Absolutely.
Whether you're a storyteller, a dentist, a doctor, a plumber, like we need all of those things in space as more and more people are going to have access to space. There's certainly traditional routes depending on your skill set and your interests, but I would say as well, just like embedding yourself in space culture and making friends that love space and getting to know people that work at aerospace companies, even if you're not there or something like that, the opportunities are really there. Even in Web3.
Exactly. Yeah,
and thanks to you, Andrew, you've inspired Emily for a new role as a firebender, space firebender.
Yeah,
this is not going to go well.
Hey, it's like you know me or something. It'll be fine. I'm a scientist. It'll be fine.
Well, you know what? We always talk about you guys need call signs. I think we just found Emily's call sign.
Oh no.
And this is the story of how Emily got rejected from
NASA. Oh man. Yep. Dream shattered. Sorry. I'm actually crying.
No, you gotta own it. You gotta own it. You gotta take the call sign and own it.
Fireball. All right, guys. Well, this is getting late and goofy, but this has been so much fun. It's always a pleasure to just sit and chat with you, Andrew.
I enjoy this. I love talking space with people. It's my livelihood now. Considering very seriously a career change, and this is the best one I could think of.
Well, you're certainly, an excellent and passionate communicator, and that definitely speaks to people for sure.
Amazing. Thank you. You're my favorite science or space communicator, hands down.
Well, that's one.
Give you a 5-star review on Google.
Checks in the mail.
Checks in the mail. Yeah. Well, with that, guys, we are just hitting our hour. Any more community questions coming in on Discord, Caroline? That was a great question at the end there.
Yeah, it was, but we did get a thank you for the insightful answer, as always, Andrew. So thank you for that.
Amazing. Amazing. Well, thank you so much, you two. We're going to be back here for a Twitter space tomorrow on the Starborn Treasure Hunt, week 4. We have an amazing top NFT artists, Jimena Buenavida, who is going to be joining us tomorrow to talk all about her work. And we'll be dropping a little bit of alpha on Clue 4, as well as announcing the winner of Clue 3, which is very exciting. And
We already know who it is anyway. Oh, I don't. Oh no. Yeah. I'm just got my fingers crossed. It's not me.
Yeah.
I stepped out of that. I was so busy. I walked into it, was like walking into a hurricane. I'm like, no, I'm going to step back and watch.
Yeah. And there's just been some absolute decryption wizards in the community too. But I mean, everyone can participate. Solving the clue and getting the POAP allows you to go into the final metaverse grand prize hunt, which is very exciting. And we'll be dropping a little bit of news later on this weekend for an event that Andrew and I are curating on Monday. Right, Andrew? Yes. Lots of stuff going on. Space Week.
Pew, 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 pew.
Well, Mike needs to copyright that, or if he hasn't already, I don't know.
Well, Caroline goes pew pew pew, and Mike goes pa pow.
Oh, okay.
So,
all right, I got you.
Semantic differences, really, but all right, you guys.
Anything from space, guys, except for the dinosaurs.
All right. Keep an eye for them.
All right. It was a pleasure. Thank you guys both for joining tonight. Have a wonderful night. Thanks everyone for tuning in. We'll see you on Discord. Okay.
All right. Take care.